Okay, so hello, bonjour, and onion to everyone in the group. I'm so glad you can make it. It's good to see you. Welcome to the TSDSB Youth Climate Action Summit, and this session is titled Get People Talking. So if you are not in the right session, please do double check your links. And otherwise, if you're in the right place, we're more than happy to have you. My name is Maha Urshid. I am a graduate student from the University of Toronto at OISE, and I'll be your host for today. So let's get going. So I know there was already a land acknowledgement done in the opening session of the summit. So I won't go over that again, but I did want to share with you all and any students who might not be familiar with Christy Belcourt. The great Christy Belcourt is a Métis artist, and she works and resides in Canada. And this is one of my favorite pieces by her. It's called The Wisdom of the Universe, done in 2014. And in her artist statement, Ms. Belcourt mentions that it's time to consider the rights of Mother Earth ahead of the rights to Mother Earth. And so definitely what I wanted to explain or share here was that the Indigenous people of this land have been doing work in sustainability for such a long time and beyond what we've been doing. And so it's always important to acknowledge that this field is very, very collaborative based. And so let us continue. So what is the agenda for today? So hopefully by this time, now students, your teachers might have talked a little bit about climate change, climate action, maybe a little bit about global warming, global heating. And again, if you were in that opening session, Ms. Arouj Riaz did explain just a bit about it. So hopefully you have some understanding. And now that you have that understanding, how do we get these conversations going? And so we're going to touch on three key areas here today. One, who do we approach for these kind of climate action, climate change conversations? So again, I'll be asking you groups to kind of brainstorm that. The how to have a conversation. Okay, so now I know who to approach. Now, how do I go about it? And thirdly, the ideas to spark conversations. And I know some of you have already been doing this work in your school, so I'm really, really excited to hear about what kinds of ways have you learned or conducted to bring that conversation alive school-wide, community-wide. So just to get us started as a little minds-on activity, I did want to start with a little excerpt from a poem. So I love poetry. And this poem is called Mother Earth by Bahar Mojab. And this is actually from the Enviro Muslims publication. So if you were here in the opening of the summit, we got to hear from Arouj Riaz, who is one of the members of Enviro Muslims, which is an organization doing phenomenal work and volunteer work for climate action and sustainability. Now, as I read this poem, Mother Earth, I want you to all kind of visualize, picture as I read through, and think of what word or phrase or idea really stands out to you about these lines. And you could either type it into the chat or you could unmute and just say it. So I'll get to reading aloud, and please just visualize and think about the poem as I go along. So starting with this first stanza. You can't silence a woman who was born free from her blackness, her roots, her soil. She will erupt in protest to be heard, while you take away her offspring, farm them for food, choke her with your tobacco fumes, and work her until there is no cotton left to pick, and scald her with your crude oil. The youth are her underground railroad. It's still 1864. Let's turn back to where love lives. Optimism encourages and hope directs. It's not too late. I dream of blue skies, clear oceans, starry nights, green forests. But I am just one person. I need an army to fight this battle. Where are you? So take a moment, and if you could maybe ask your class or into the chat or unmute. I'll give you a minute to do that too. Please do continue typing if you are still doing so, but some of these thoughts are really, really powerful in the chat, and I'll just highlight a couple of them. The Taylor Creek School mentioned youth are her Underground Railroad, and I'm so glad that you picked up on that, because definitely this shows that it's not just climate change that we're talking about climate justice. And it is Black History Month, and I'm pretty sure that some of you have already learned about the Underground Railroad, which was a way for slaves to escape from their slavery from America into either Canada or Mexico. So it's not like a real like railroad, like not like trains, but it was actually like a map of paths that they could take to get their freedom. And so this was, as we know, 1864, this is where we happen to have these abolition movement starts. So the battles against slavery, the Confederate War, and again, maybe you've talked about this, maybe you haven't, but that's the key part here, that was a major injustice happening. And so similarly, there's a major injustice happening now, but only it's against the earth itself. Erupt and protest, also highlighted in the chat, yes. So really getting that collective action piece in, really, really important. An army to fight this battle. So definitely this language of fighting and this language of, there's some sort of a giant challenge that we need to face and confront. But then also the positives, right? Turn back to where love lives. So there's this hope that comes near the end of this poem, definitely more optimism. So there's an interesting comment of the chat that the earth is presented as a woman, and usually we do say Mother Earth, right? And there's a history of that, seeing the earth as the nurturing and the place where we gain our resources and live off of, just like a maternal figure would. And so definitely that's an interesting point there. The earth is a giver, as you mentioned. And so Mother Earth is being misused and overused. So definitely this really strong idea here that we're taking too much and giving too little back. And so that's why we need to be doing our, having this fight, right? Or doing this protest. There needs to be some sort of action now being taken. So great ideas, the whole group. Thank you so much for contributing. So moving along. So we know now we have to take some sort of climate action. We need to, we've learned a little bit about this climate change, climate justice, injustice that are happening. We know a little bit now. How do we now gain awareness about it? And how do we get the people talking? And that's the session today, right? How do we get these people now learning about what we know and getting these topics started? So I'd like you to now brainstorm. Okay, so who are these people that we ought to be talking to? And I'll be putting this link into the chat. It is a link to a Jamboard. And if you haven't used a Jamboard before, that is perfectly fine. I will guide you through it. So if you open up that link, and you should be seeing it on my page as well. And if you're not, give me a shout in the chat. But right now I have my page open to the Jamboard link. If you haven't used one of these before, it's basically like a brainstorming sort of message board. And so I'd like you to go to the left side here and click the sticky note button. And once you click that button, you will be able to add a message in and save it to the chat board. And so for this Jamboard, I want you to brainstorm with your classes, with your groups. Who could you talk to about climate change and climate action? Who could you have this conversation with and say, hey, we need to talk about this real important topic? So I'll give you another maybe 2 minutes to brainstorm, and then we'll come back and look at your answers. You can keep adding as we go along, but I'm seeing some great ideas already populating the chat, and some I didn't even hear or think of. So great. So we have lots of ideas here. And on my screen, I can see some similarities and a lot of differences too. So there's a common theme that we should be talking to, well, first of all, our friends, right? Our friends are the closest to us, and those are the people we're meeting every day. And so that's one of the easiest way to get started, having or getting used to having these conversations, because your friends and you are very close. And so definitely that's one way to get started in having these conversations. Teachers, yes, other students, good, and parents. So people who are currently in our community, right? People who might not know much about things, classmates, right? So people who have not been exposed to climate change or have not thought about it so much, your peers that you see in their community. Definitely the community is a big, big piece of it, right? Your principal maybe, right? So you might say, hey, you're learning this really cool thing in class, or, this is a really important topic in class. And so perhaps, let's have a conversation, maybe something we could do in the school could lead to some potential actions. So definitely we're seeing on the micro level as well. So friends, individuals, classmates, neighbors, yes, definitely neighbors as well, reaching out to our circle, right? And I'm seeing some of the macro levels here already. So great job there. So people in leadership and people in positions of influence, definitely. So we can start those conversations with them. I see mayors and local politicians, right? So those people who might have actual power making those policies that are really not climate friendly. So we can talk about them and express our discontent and, give them ideas for policy changes. So businesses as well. So definitely great job. And again, please do continue to populate that, but great ideas so far. Now, you've already touched on a lot of these next ones. So I'm back on my slides. So hopefully you should see my slides. So as mentioned in the opening of the summit, there is going to be the TSDSB Youth Climate Action Guide, a link that is going to be shared with you all. And so basically it talks a little bit about this topic, and you've already covered like so much of this already. And it says when you're talking or thinking about getting people talking, here are like some of the main groups you should focus on. So such as your family members, right? Or your extended family members, your peers. And again, this was already mentioned, right? Your friends and your other the people that you interact with on a daily basis. Sports group even, yeah. So if you're on a team, you could start that conversation as you're, maybe practicing for like, hey, there's something going on in my class that we talked about. Youth groups or clubs that you're involved in. So there can also be like inter-club cooperation, right? So perhaps the art club can interact with the ego club. You can create something together. Your neighborhood, definitely. So a lot of neighborhood contacts you can make, talk to them about, again, people that you're comfortable with, right? And your faith community. So of course, we have different faiths and we go to different places to celebrate and to commit our faith. So definitely you can go into your faith communities and talk about this important and have this important discussion. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, right? There are so many contacts that you could meet and talk. So how do we get this conversation started? Well, having a conversation with someone, you can't just go in and say, hey, the climate is dying. That will really be not so great as a starting point. To have a conversation with someone, first of all, you got to get to know them. Okay, so you need to invest that time in building that relationship with that person that you are talking to. Otherwise, they're not going to listen to you. They'll be like, who is this? So you need to figure out what makes them tick. And you have to help them connect the dots. Again, this is a quote from the great Katherine Hayhoe, who is a climate scientist. And she gave this talk in 2018 in a TED talk and a TED conference. And she mentioned this really, really important key thing. Every single person in the world already has the values they need to care about in a changing climate. What this means is that there is no one in the world who is going to say, oh boy, I can't wait to burn more garbage in the landfill and put that gas into the air, right? There's no one who's going to say, hey, the polar ice caps are melting. So cool, right? Nobody is going to say that because, again, the health of our planet is the way the only path we have for our own livelihoods. But some people might not have connected those dots yet to see the health of the planet to the health of themselves. And that's what your conversations could do for them, to make those connections. So again, the Youth Climate Action Guide kind of helps you approach this as well. So for every effective and strategic climate conversation, someplace where you really want to have an impact, try thinking by making a plan, right? So not just going in blindly, but having some sort of thoughts beforehand. Okay, so maybe, this is what I could bring up, and here's a fact that they might not know. Something to start off with. Okay, so again, some of us might not be good at that conversation piece, and myself included. I can't go in and have like that big discussion without thinking about it first. And so the guide does have a community climate action plan template you could start with, like a sort of like a sheet that you could fill in and try to think about what you could say. And so these are like the key questions you should be considering. what is their interest? So that person that you're talking to or that entity that you're talking to, what are their interests and how can you tap into them? Okay, so you want to really make yourself relatable to that other party and really talk to them about, what they like and what their interests are. And the approaches that might work with one party, one person, might not work with the other one. And so you got to be really careful. There might be some things that you might want to avoid saying. Now, this could be like a big question the teachers could talk to you about after this workshop. Again, there's so much, right? We could talk about this. Given the current climate in Canada, that polarized division that is happening, how do you stop turning things into arguments, right? How do you stop it being from, my team versus yours, like the Leafs versus the Senators kind of thing, right? You want to be actually establishing that we're all on one team, right? But what are those points of friction that you might best avoid just for now, right? Especially in those opening conversations that you're having. So definitely something that you could think about more greatly. Now, here's the really big piece that I also wanted to see and brainstorm about. Now, what are those actual ways that you could get those conversations started at your school? So how do you get people thinking about climate change action? For example, you could set up an online workshop and give everyone a chance to brainstorm ideas. And that sounds familiar, right? Ain't that what we're doing now? So what you're going to be doing now is you're going to be going back to the Jamboard. And what I'll be doing is putting you into breakout groups, okay? Just so you can have someone perhaps to have a conversation with and, unmute yourself and like talk a little bit through. So I'll be putting you into breakout groups. And again, you're going to be clicking on this new Jamboard link and I'll put it in the chat, but basically it's the same link that you were working on prior, just the second slide. So here you're going to be brainstorming what are some ways you could spark conversations about climate change, climate actions in the school or in the community, because we've got both options here, right? So again, I will be creating breakout rooms and each room will have 2 participants. And so this is a chance for you to kind of personally talk about perhaps things that you're doing in your schools already, creating this awareness campaigns. So if you have any questions, you may stay behind and I can address them, or otherwise, please go ahead and join your breakout rooms. I will give you the next 8 or so minutes. So please do feel free to have a conversation. Okay, so the rooms should be open now. Okay, so we should have everyone back from their rooms. And thank you so much for, again, participating in that activity. My gosh, take a look at the whole Jamboard. It is absolutely it's absolutely full. And that is so amazing to see. So many great ideas. And don't worry, you will be getting like a copy of this Jamboard, a copy of the slides after the session is over. But there are so much that I can barely touch on all of them. So many good ideas that perhaps you've already undertaken in your schools, or perhaps you've thought about. So we're seeing everything from all the way to class and school goals to individual goals to creative aspects. So I love the focus on songs and arts, even role plays. Video games even, that was surprising to see, but not so surprising because yes, you could make such powerful messages from these kinds of different forms of media, dioramas, so a lot of creative pieces here. And again, those actionable pieces, right? So the games, challenges, the goals that are happening. And again, the informational pieces, PSAs, billboards, brochures, school announcement, advertisements, contests even, yes, and YouTube videos, picture books. Oh my gosh, there's so much. So great job, everybody. Like I said, there's almost no room on the board to continue, and we might have to make another slide if we were continuing this activity. But definitely you could see that there are so many entry points into having conversations and so many ways to start that conversation. So even an art piece in the middle of the school, right? Just put it in there and people would look at it and be like, hey, what is that? And having that curiosity come up could actually spur that conversation or start that process. So definitely a lot of great ideas here, something you could take in the class or even as a school or in the community. So great job all. And again, as I mentioned, you can review these at your own leisure right after the workshops, because you will have those shared. And so you had so many great ideas. covers all these, I think. So such as the PA announcements, inviting parents and community members at in-person virtual events, lunch and learns, banners. So we had a lot of that like art piece, right? And on our Jamboard. So really having a place for people to informally share ideas. So visiting local businesses. So remember we talked about micro and macro, right? So this is a way to get into, sort of slide yourself into macro as well. So talk about to those local businesses as well and have those conversations with them. How are you helping the environment and what ways you could? So if some of these are a little bit, and I know some of these cost money, right? Some of these could be a little bit expensive or, you don't have the funds for it. Again, please do stay after the workshops are over for the final closing remarks for the summit, because there will be the announcement of new funding through the Youth Climate Action Grant. And so stay tuned for that. And so just an example of one of the monthly banners, again, and art was mentioned so many times, right, in that Jamboard, because it's so powerful and so connective to many students. So this is an example from Woburn CI, who put in big banners right in front of their schools with markers like posted around them, had students write messages. And this turned up to be like an informal sort of exchange of ideas. And so here they had green New Year's resolutions. Here it was pipelines and Fridays for Future, as we all know, a really powerful movement. So definitely you could do something like this, and it doesn't have to be like a huge step, right? So even a banner starting off could have really, really productive conversations. And so as we are nearing the end of this session, I just want to once again thank you for all your participation. And I wanted to end off with another sort of poetry piece from the Environment Muslims publication. And so I guess this is a gift to you and to all those students who are doing this important work. Allowing the brush of the wind to move through my soul, I realize I am a catalyst for growth. I am the change maker, the lauded champion, and the steward of the past, present, and future. So really, really powerful words. And so you are all change makers. And I'm just going to say that having these conversations, it won't always be easy and it won't always be straightforward. And you might also get pushback. But again, that is the challenge we are undertaking, to be these change makers and champions. And that is the challenge that you are undertaking. And you have the full support of the instructors in your community and your teachers, right? So you are definitely not alone. And this is a collaborative team movement for a better future. So thank you again for participating in this workshop. And it was a pleasure having you all here today with me. The next workshop will start at 10:35. So please go ahead and take a 10-minute break. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask them, or otherwise you can log out now.
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to have a quick request. Is it possible to share the slides used for your presentation with us? Is that something you can do?
Yes, definitely. So these slides will be posted, and the after workshop, you will get a resource guide, and these slides will be there. Okay, so the links to the Jamboards, everything, including the Environment Muslims publication, which is awesome, it will all be there in that resource section.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome.